Welcome back to the Mintner Method. I'm your host, Andrew Mintner, and on today's episode, we are going to take a look at the American Athletic Conference Championship game between Tulane and one of our favorite teams of the year, Army. Now, this is a game that is kind of polarizing to me because when I look at Tulane's performance last week against Memphis, it was very uninspiring. And that really is unfortunate because I felt like if they would have won that game and they, potentially come out here and have a good showing against Army, they would have had an outside shot at making the playoff. Now, that is all for naught at this point, but they can still, secure a championship here. Now, this is a polarizing game simply because Army has been like a darling for anyone who has even remotely watched this channel for us all year. The academy teams have been very good to us. We have really honed in on the things that, we have a lot of experience looking at advanced rush metrics and things like that. And, the games are very clear-cut when you're handicapping them. Now, when I look at this game, there are a couple things that Tulane does that Army just has not seen yet, and we're going to dive into that. Now, looking at the early downs data here, you can see both of these teams are really good. They're just really good on early downs. That is not surprising, especially from Army's perspective, as they are just it's an incredible team when it comes to, rushing the ball. And again, as always, it's 1,000 paper cuts, right? This is the best Army team I've ever seen. I'm 34 years old. So, to each their own. So there's not much to look at here. As you can see, they're both really good. Now, Tulane does rush the ball 68% of the time on early downs. So that is something to note. Obviously that's not as one-sided as like 89% of the time for Army, but it is something to note going forward. Now, like I was saying in the previous video, we're going to look at some of the advanced rush metrics that I've been kind of tracking in my absence in the last, month or so. Now, yards before contact and yards after contact, these are two different metrics. The yards before contact is really an offensive line metric. Yards after contact is really a tackling metric or a running back metric. And then, we kind of mold that in with your EPA per rush attempt and your overall, rushing yards per attempt, right? So when we're looking here, there are a couple of things. The yards after contact ranking for Tulane is pretty bad. 121st on defense is very concerning. And I was very concerned about this when they played Navy a couple of weeks ago, but I'm going to kind of put those concerns to bed as we dive in here a little deeper. Now, Army is really good. All the way around, they're good in EPA, good in rush yards per attempt, yards before contact. They're even solid in yards after contact, especially for the athletes that they have, not being like, 5-star recruits and stuff like that. Now, when we go to the schematic side, this is something that really stands out to me. So Army is running zone blocking scheme at 73% of the time. That is considerably higher than Air Force and Navy, which run it right in the 55 percentile, 57%, something like that. And so the man blocking schemes are where Tulane is, the most susceptible to being taken advantage of. This type of, blocking, the zone stuff, that is where their strength is. They've played really well against zone blocking schemes. They have been more susceptible to the man blocking schemes. Now, when we go over to the Tulane side of the ball, rushing the ball, there's not really a ton that really stands out overall. They're kind of like, not strength on strength, but, above average for Tulane and Army's defense. Now, the advanced statistics, this is something where we just really want to dive in and see a couple of different things, right? The Army defensive line and whatnot has some weaknesses, which really I think is going to be an issue against this type of offense that really could give them trouble. 97th in stuff rate, 118th in defensive line yards, 111th overall havoc. This is pretty concerning, and the reason being is they have not faced an offense built like Tulane. And I'm going to give you an example here right now. Okay, so one thing that Tulane does is they are living in the modern offense realm, okay? They are second in play action drop back percentage at 54.5%, okay? Now, that is insane when we're talking about passing the ball. So, but their EPA is 33rd, 0.167, and they're very good in non-play action passing attempts also. So that right there is something that is they're good overall passing the ball. And then when we get to the motion side of it, this is another part where they are number one in college football and motion drop back percentage. So on passing plays, 68.8% of the time, there's going to be some motion incorporated in that. And to kind of show you the mass difference in EPA, they're 0.260, which is fifth overall in EPA per pass attempt that has a motion implemented in it. When they have non-motion passing attempts, negative 0.017, 26 times more efficient. So that's why they're running motion at 68% of the time. They understand that from a modern, standpoint, that they are out leveraging the defense on these motion attempts, and they're showing that they are really good at that. And so then when we go to the motion rushing, it's the same exact concept. All right, there is a motion when they're rushing the ball 61.9% of the time, and they are 17th in EPA per attempt when they have motion implemented in their rushing attempts. So 0.083 on non-motion rushing attempts, they are 8 times less efficient, even into the negative EPA. So that is something like they have, I don't know who is doing the analytics there and diving in, but they're like, yeah, we're doing this. This is a big deal, right? And this is kind of what I want to show you right now. Out of all their offensive plays, so whether it's a pass or a rush, they are implementing motion 68.3% of the time, okay? Over 2/3 of their offensive plays have motion in them. And they're third overall in that and 9th in EPA. 15 times more efficient than when they just line up with no motion. That is an incredible metric to kind of take in, okay? So let's take a look real quick at the most efficient passing play that you can have, right? They are first overall in a pass attempt that not only has motion, but it implements play action. All right? To give you an example here, 2.53 EPA per attempt versus 0.03 when they just line up, no motion, no play action. That is an insane difference. And I touched base on this way earlier in the year when I was doing offensive coordinator stuff and how modern offenses, are going to have this type of things in it. But it's rare that you get this type of implementation at this high of a rate and this efficient. They just understand what they're doing offensively from either side, from rushing, passing, it does not matter. They understand how to out-leverage defenses. So when we go to Army, we need to look at how they're going to do against these type of plays, right? Play action, non-play action, very good, right? The non-motion, motion stuff, pretty decent along the line, right? And they do pretty decent against these extreme plays, right? But here's the difference, okay? So let's go to the schedule. I mean, this is not to take anything away from the schedule, okay? But this is outside of Notre Dame and arguably North Texas, who was decent, and UTSA, this is as cupcake of a schedule as it's going to get. Okay, there's not anything even remotely close to what they're going to see against Tulane here. They didn't have to play Memphis. They didn't play, South Florida when Brown was healthy. They've played literally nobody else in the American that outside of UTSA that could give them trouble. And UTSA gave them a ton of trouble last week. All right, now we're going to look at this advanced box score here. Army's expected to win this 92% of the time, right? So they won, all right? But the difference is, look at the gigantic difference in field position. This is not going to happen against Tulane. They are not going to get 12 and a half yards of field position advantage. That is the difference in the game. The reason I say that is the difference in the game is simply UTSA had less scoring opportunities. Every time they got inside the 40 of Army, they scored. Every single time. They got 24 points. That's all their points, right? And then when you look at it, in the metrics that you think Army would dominate in, they did not, okay? They were in success rate, UTSA 5% higher. On standard downs, 4% higher. On passing downs, 7% higher. And then from an explosive standpoint, Army was a little bit better, none of which was super explosive, right? This is the difference, like, in this game here. I do not think that Army is going to be able to withstand this Tulane offense. And here's another point, okay? Tulane is third in EPA per short attempt, which is 1 to 9 yards, but they're dead last in short percentage attempts. 26.6% of the time will they pass the ball, 1 to 9 yards. And they're not only fifth in these Mickey Mouse attempts in EPA, which is very good, but they are, 127th in attempts percentage. So they're not looking to throw the ball at 9 yards or less, even though they're doing it 51% of the time. Look at just this is just something I just cannot stress more, okay? They're throwing the ball 11 to 19 yards down the field 28% of the time when they're passing, and they're 8th in EPA, okay? And then when we come over here and you look at the deep percentage, they're 17.3% of the time passing the ball down the field of 20 yards or more, and they're 48th in EPA, but it's still positive 0.405. This type of attack is something that none of the other teams that Army has faced has been able to implement. My case in point is UTSA passed the ball 10 yards or more down the field 31% of the time. Okay, and they were not even great at it. They were 61st overall. Tulane is different. They're just built different. Okay, and this offense is, I was wrong at the beginning of the season saying that I felt like they were going to have an off season. Willie Fritz being gone, the whole coaching staff being turned over, losing, their quarterback. I felt like it was going to be a down year, but I was fucking wrong by a long shot. And I know this pains a lot of people who are going to back Army, but I realistically think -5.5 is the line right now. There is a very legitimate chance that Tulane is going to win this game by 17 or more. Like, it's definitely in the realm of possibility. I feel like the offense is just built different. It's different. They understand the modern techniques, and that is why they've been so successful this year. And I know that they showed up and unfortunately lost to Memphis, and that was just a devastating loss. But outside of that, their only other two losses is Oklahoma and Kansas State. Both games which they played really well in. They've pretty much dominated everybody else the entirety of the way out. The loss to Memphis, completely unacceptable. But I think, I think they were obviously looking ahead, knowing that they already had the championship spot locked up. So there was a ton. There was a ton to play for, but they dropped the ball there. And the difference is when you look at the game log here, the rushing, Memphis really took it to them, rushing the ball, 4.92 yards a clip. But the threat is on the opposite side. They had, Seth Hennigan is a legitimate quarterback. I don't think he's amazing, but he is really good. And this is what this is what they were dealing with on the opposite side. That doesn't look like a ton, but that type of efficiency paired with, the ability to rush the ball really well is, that's the recipe for disaster. So the other thing is they have played Navy this year. I think Army is way better than Navy. But, the look-ahead line has Army only favored by 3 points, so they ain't that much better, And they held Navy in check. That game was never in doubt. 2.86 yards per attempt. I know Horvath got injured in that game, but, I'm just, they still dominated the scheme. And that's kind of really where this is all about. So, anyway, that's going to be it for this episode. If you enjoyed the content, please like, comment, subscribe, share it with a friend or a loved one. I'm going to be doing every single game for championship weekend. And then I'm going to be doing a deep dive into the playoffs when they come out. I'm really excited to look at the format and look at the matchups. I think there's an extreme amount of value that can be offered, especially with some of the look-ahead lines. So that's going to be it for today's episode. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.